I'm Reg Watson, Tasmanian historian and author, and I'm here at the moment at the Back River Methodist Cemetery, just outside the beautiful township of New Norfolk. And the reason I'm here is because in this burial yard lies the remains of Betty King. Now, who was Betty King? She's the claimant to be the first white woman to set foot on Australian soil on January the 26th, 1788. And somewhere here is the husband, Samuel King. So what is the claim and who produced this memorial we will discover. The memorial reads, and unfortunately it's losing the lettering, "Near the spot was laid to rest Betty King, first white woman to set foot in Australia." And here we have a similar plaque that was erected in 1988 by the Fellowship of First Fleeters. And on it they have her maiden name, Elizabeth Thackery. So how come this was erected? And who erected it and when? Interesting story. It goes back to the Shoebridge family. Sir Robert Shoebridge knew Betty King and was so impressed by her story, the saying that she was the first white woman in Australia way back in January the 26th, 1788, it impressed him greatly. And when his son, William, was 4 years of age, he introduced William to Betty, and William never forgot it. And he passed in turn the story down to his son, Sir Rupert's grandson, Henry. And Henry was so impressed with the story that he did a lot of research, even going to the Mitchell Library in Sydney. And he was convinced that the claim Betty made, the first white woman in Australia, was true. And in 1954, he wrote a substantial letter to the newspaper at New Norfolk. And in 1963, he took the trouble of erecting this tombstone in memory of Betty King. So the question we must ask, is the claim true? Well, to be quite honest, there's no documentation to the story. We can't really prove it. But Henry and William, his father, and Sir Rupert was convinced the story was true, and who's to say it's not? Now the story goes like this, that Betty relayed to young William Shoebridge, who passed it on to Henry. Betty left England in 1787. In 1786 she was convicted of stealing 2 silk handkerchiefs and 3 others. We don't know the exact birth date of Betty. Some say she was 89, others go as long as 93. She certainly lived a long life. But before passing on to the fleet that was to leave for Australia in Plymouth, she was put on a hulk called the Dunkirk, and she was there for a whole year. Now, she was then being part of the new adventure to Australia, and she was placed on the transport ship, the Friendship, which primarily were female convicts, although it also had a number of male convicts. Now, the Friendship was a bad ship. It was dank, dark and dirty. It was a terrible ship. The conditions were absolutely appalling. And in May 1787, a fleet of 1,480 souls made up of convicts and officers' wives and administration and the officers themselves and the Marines and the sailors set sail for that new adventure to Australia. They first went to Tenerife, the Spanish colony of Tenerife, then into Rio. Now that took some time, and the conditions of the convicts were absolutely appalling. And there was a lot of behavioural problems, and Betty behaved very badly. At one time she was put in irons because of her dreadful behaviour. Then from Rio they went to the Dutch colony in South Africa, the Cape Colony. There food was allowed to improve because they purchased vegetables and fruit and new stock for meat, although the conditions for the convicts didn't really improve. Now on board that ship was also Samuel King. Now Samuel King was a Marine, and he comes a major part of our story later on. Now Betty was moved from the Friendship to Lady Penrhyn, and they set sail for the final course to Botany Bay. They landed at Botany Bay January the 20th. There's a a wrong assumption that the first fleet went straight to Sydney, but they didn't. On the 20th of January, they went to Botany Bay, and the Governor Phillip, said, well, this is not a good place for a settlement. Very little water, the soil was poor, and it's just not a good place for settlement. So he went exploring, and he found, in his own words, the best harbour in the world. And that, of course, was Sydney Cove. So he moved the settlement to Sydney Cove. And on January the 26th, as we know, history teaches, he and the officers came ashore, and we now know that, of course, as Australia Day. But the ladies weren't allowed to come until a couple of days afterwards. Now, on January the 28th, they were bringing in some officers' wives. And Betty had moved up the ladder, if you like, and she became an officer's maid. So she was accompanying the officers in the boat to take them to the shore. Now, as I was going along, it was very choppy. And the delicate little souls, the officers' wives, thought, well, if we're going to be carried ashore, we're going to get a wetting. So let's use one of these servants to test the waters. So they refused to go ashore unless there was someone who would do it before them to ensure that their presence on the soil was safe and dry. So Betty is asked to do the chore. So Betty was picked up by one of the sailors. Betty, one of the officers' maids, and was taken ashore. And when she was taken ashore, her feet were planted on Sydney Cove, January the 28th, 1788, thus becoming the first white woman to set foot in Australia. Now, it's not recorded. I mean, why would you record it? It's Betty. She's a convict. Heaven's sake, we've had trouble with her all the way across the course from England to Australia. And she's not important as us, so it wouldn't be recorded. And no doubt it was recorded who the first white woman was, and it would have been an officer's wife. So Betty has that claimant. As I said, there's no documentation, there's nothing to say that it's not true. But anyway, skipping a little bit, Betty was sent to Norfolk Island soon afterwards in March 1790 on the vessel Sirius. And she was a convict up there. In fact, she got 25 lashes for one time for skipping Phillipstown without permission. So she had behavioural problems. At the same time going there was her future husband, Samuel King. As I said, he was a Marine, and he went to Norfolk Island, and he retired from the Marines at Norfolk Island and got a land grant. Now Betty served a sentence, and she became free. And Betty was actually given 50 acres of land on Norfolk Island. Now this is most unusual, because it was very rare for a woman to be given granted land, especially on Norfolk Island. Anyway, she shacked up. It says they were married, but they were never married, to a fellow called James Dodding. And they had a son, actually. So Betty did have a son, but sadly the son died and is buried on Norfolk Island. Anyway, the order came to move from Norfolk Island back to Sydney. So Betty and James came back to Sydney, as did Samuel, her future husband. And whilst in Sydney, they decided to come to the new colony of Van Diemen's Land. So in 1807, Betty King and James Dodding, who is described as husband and wife, came to Van Diemen's Land, but into Hobart, but they separated and they went on their own ways. Now what happened between 1807 and 1808 with Betty, I don't know. How she survived, I don't know. But in 1808, the city of Edinburgh, the ship arrived also in Hobart Town, and aboard was Samuel King. Now he had retired, as I said, as a Marine, and he settled here. He was given land here at Back River, 50 acres. And he met Betty. He would have known her on Norfolk Island in any case. And in 1810, they were married. They were married by pioneer priest Robert Knopwood. And Betty was given 20 acres of land here as well. And her husband, Samuel, now her husband, was given an extra 200 acres. So here they farmed what they call King's Rock. And it was called King's Rock because a local told me, the local farmer just told me, she used to sit on some rocks over there and adopted the name King's Rocks for the property. That was many years ago. Now, Samuel died in 1849, and he died and is buried here, as I said. Betty followed him in 1856, and it's mentioned by the Hobart Courier that the first white woman in Australia died. Now, they had no children, so they left the land to Sir Rupert Shoebridge, and that's how the Shoebridges got involved with the story of Betty King. Now, they don't own the land anymore. Over the near 200 years, it's gone from one to another, and the local farmer lives very close by here who now owns the land. So that's the story of Betty King. Can it be proven? No, but we can't not prove it as well. Her and her husband Samuel, they endured a lot of hardship, a lot of pain, a lot of setbacks, but they are typical of our pioneers. And another distinction of Betty, although again it could be challenged, is not only being the first white woman to set foot on Australia, she most possibly is the last lady or person to die from the First Fleet. As I said, she died in 1856. 89, some say 92 years. We don't know her birth date, as I said. So that's a story of Betty King. Now, I think she should be remembered and honoured. And I'm surprised that not more are made of the fact that here in our own backyard we have a claimant to be the first white woman in Australia. And much should be made of it. So Betty, I admire you and Samuel, what you did. And I hope this attempt is to get your life out there so that many beyond the shores of Tasmania will appreciate your sacrifice and your efforts and your ordeal. Thank you.